Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This evening, we'll be taking a look at Green Earth Advocates. Our presenters tonight are Vaughn Hamill DeLone Sr., Sasha Gay Gooden, and Dion Sadler R. Scott. So Green Earth Advocates is an organization that is primarily supported through public funding and donor contributions, making its ethical integrity and public image very crucial to the sustainability and impact. As Green Earth Advocates continue to expand their outreach and influence, the role of the human resources becomes increasingly vital. HR is not only responsible for managing internal personnel, but also for ensuring that the organization maintains its ethical standards, effectively engage volunteers, and also foster an inclusive, mission-aligned workplace culture. So let's take a brief look at the organization's overview. So the name is Green Earth Advocates. They're a mid-sized environmental advocacy non-profit organization. They were established 10 years ago, and now they have around 150 employees. So their key characteristics are heavily reliant on volunteers. They're publicly funded, and there is a strong focus on maintaining an ethical and positive public image. The purpose of this presentation this evening is to identify and propose critical HR-driven policies tailored to Green Earth Advocates, to also outline HR's role in developing, implementing, and managing these policies effectively, and also to support organizational sustainability, mission alignment, and operational excellence through strategic HR practices. So let's take a look at the critical HR-driven policies. This is volunteer management and engagement policy, and this is why it is critical. Volunteers are essential to the operations and advocacy. Inconsistent volunteer management can lead to burnout, high turnover, and reputational risk. Ethical treatment of unpaid labor is central to the organization's values and public trust. So what is HR's role in all of this? The first one, stage. So we need to research and draft, and the responsibility of HR is to conduct focus groups or interviews with the volunteers and the staff. Research and drafting is to benchmark best practices in volunteer management in similar nonprofits. When we come on to the development stage, we need to create a structured onboarding process. We need to define the roles and the responsibilities and the rights of the volunteers. And we also need to establish performance expectation and feedback mechanisms. Communication and training. We're to also train staff on working effectively with volunteers, and to also distribute handbooks or guidelines outlining the policy expectation. Compliance and monitoring. We need to track volunteers' hours and satisfaction, regularly evaluate program impacts and retention matrix, and also review and revise policy based on feedback and legal changes. Ethics and conflicts of interest policy. Even though it's a non-profit organization, we also have to have these policies in place. The organization's mission demands a strong ethical public image. Missteps, for example, personal gain from donor funds, political bias, can jeopardize the trust and funding. As public funding and donations increase, scrutiny of employees or leadership behavior arises. The roles of HR in these issues: stage and responsibilities, research and draft, align nonprofit governance best practices, collaborate with legal or compliance teams to ensure regulatory alignment, development, define conflicts of interest clearly, whether it be political affiliations or donor relationships. And we also need to include mandatory disclosure processes. Communication and training. Conduct annual training sessions and provide practical case studies and questions and answer materials. Compliance and monitoring. Maintain disclosure logs, create anonymous reporting channels, and coordinate regular audits and policy reviews. Working in an environment, we have to have diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging policy. That's the DEIB policy. This covers environmental justice, which is deeply connected to social justice. Diverse representation improves advocacy, effectiveness, and credibility. It also promotes fair and inclusive treatment of all staff, volunteers, and community partners. So HR's role in all of this: research and drafting. HR is responsible for analyzing the workforce and the volunteer demographics. Consult with the DEI experts and marginalized community stakeholders. There's the development stage. Establish goals for inclusive recruitment and leadership pathways. Include anti-discrimination language and accommodation standards. Communication and training. Offer mandatory unconscious bias training. Publish internal reports on DEIB efforts and progress. Compliance and monitoring. Set up DEI review committees and monitor the hiring or promotion data, and also investigate any bias-related grievances. All right, let's take a look at the summary strategy for HR. So we're going to take a look at the policy area and the HR strategic goal. So the policy area is volunteer engagement, and the strategic goal for HR is to create structured, supportive, and respectful system that retains and empowers its volunteers. Ethical integrity. HR strategic goal is to protect the organization's ethical standards through robust policy and training. Inclusive culture. HR needs to promote an internal culture that reflects the organization's environmental and social values. So by strategically leading the development and implementation of these HR-driven policies, Green Earth Advocates can strengthen its internal operations, public trust, and overall mission effectiveness. So the organizational representation. What is HR goals in representing organizational interests, values, and culture? Human resources, HR, serves a really big bridge between leadership and internal stakeholders, employees, volunteers, managers, internal committee, and even when applicable, labor unions. For a mission-driven organization like Green Earth Advocates, where public trust and internal cohesion is very much important, HR plays a very important role in ensuring that the organization's values are not just stated, but lived and reinforced across all levels. We need to embed ethical and environmental values internally. So the role of HR is to translate the organization's ethical and environmental mission into internal policies, communication, and practices. This ensures alignment between day-to-day operations and the broader advocacy goals of the organization. For example, HR leads orientation sessions for new employees and volunteers that include training on the organization's environmental code of ethics, expectations for sustainable workplace behavior, and anti-greenwashing principles. That means you don't just adhere to the principles that you feel like. HR also updates internal documentation and training materials to include the organization's stance on climate justice and environmental equity. Championing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The role of HR serves as a steward of the DEIB within the organization, ensuring that the internal culture reflects the values of justice and inclusivity. Especially important for an advocacy organization with community-facing impact. An example of this is HR implements inclusive recruitment practices that prioritizes representation of BIPOC and the LGBTQ+ and marginalized communities in staff and also leadership roles. organizes regular internal DEIB workshop, and creates feedback channels where employees can share concerns anonymously. Internal communication and culture building. The role of HR is to ensure consistent and transparent communication between leadership to team, while also nurturing a collaborative mission-aligned culture. Examples of this: HR facilitates monthly mission moment meetings where employees and volunteers can share stories about their environmental work and how it connects to organization's mission. They also act as a mediator in team conflicts, ensuring resolution strategies align with the values of non-violence, respect, and community. Employee advocacy and ethical oversight role. HR advocates for staff well-being while ensuring compliance with ethical standards that protects the organization's integrity and mission. Example: HR creates and monitors whistleblower policy and reporting channels for unethical behavior, ensuring employees feel safe to speak up. They conduct regular employee engagement surveys so they can understand morale and ensure employees feel aligned with organizational values. So through communication, training, policy, enforcement, and cultural leadership, HR will act both as a guardian and organization values and voice for employees. At Green Earth Advocates, where environmental ethics and public perception are central, HR's role in organizational representation is not just supportive, it has to be strategic.
Hello everyone. Let's continue with HR Human Resources External Representation Role. So stakeholders for HR representation role, concrete examples. Let's go. We have our potential employees position the organization as an ethical, which mission-driven employer. And of course, we're speaking at universities' career fairs and we're posting sustainability-focused recruitment ads. We go on to regulation bodies demonstrate policy compliance with labor laws, safety, and volunteer protections. Submitting diversity metrics and environmental workplace policy reports to government agency. Community groups foster trust and build grassroots supports, which hosting our Green Career Workshop, attended local environmental cleanup events, and industrial association shared best practices in sustainable HR and volunteer management, represented at non-profit HR conferences and on eco-friendly workforce policies. So let's go into our realistic examples in the practices, okay? So we go on to our environmental job fairs. HR promotes career opportunities while showcasing the organizational sustainability culture. And with grant compliance meetings, HR represents forced diversity volunteers engagement and ethical recruitment data to ensure that we secure continued funding. We have policy roundtables. HR advocates for national volunteers, protection and standards as eco-conscious workplace regulations. And we use our local radio features, which HR shares our employee-driven sustainability projects to inspire the community to get involved and come on board with us. All right? We're moving on to our stakeholder engagement strategies. So let's think about it. Authentic storytelling. If we put ourselves out there, we need real volunteers from our employee side and of course from volunteer side to tell the stories to make it more relatable. There's nothing more realistic than having our own to tell the experience of what they experienced. All right? We have our proactive compliance. We want to ensure that we submit our reports before the deadlines and to highlight sustainable HR practices in them. You know, we get ahead of the game. And we have our partnership building, which we collaborate with local schools and green businesses for shared initiatives. We want everybody to be involved, right? The more the merrier. We We have our media positioning. We always prepare our spokesperson to handle the interviews, get them involved, and be aligned with the message with environmental advocacy. So let's think about it. Why this threatens the organization? This increases the funding. We cannot continue without our trusted donors for the organization, and we want to be as transparent as possible and ethical workforce practices. This also boosts recruitment. Candidates are drawn to purpose-driven employers with the vision committed to values. We want everybody to be on board with the same vision. All right? We protest reputation. So we proactively representation prevents negative public perception. We don't want anybody to have any negative perception of us. So we always try to be as transparent as possible. And we move on to our expand influences. HR's involvement in policy with discussion helps shape the environmental workplace standards. We move on to our non-profit organization as actions. So HR must act both as an operational manager, and our public advocacy, especially in public advocacy organization, where we have to ensure that our credibility is aligned with our mission. We can't stress on our credibility because we want to make sure that it's aligned and all is on board. All right. In environmental advocacy, workforce ethics and sustainability policies are themselves a form of evidence of the mission's authenticity. And our stakeholders' trust often determines both funding and influences. So we have to ensure that we are consistent and we reinforce the trust because we need those donations to ensure that we are kept afloat. So our overall core strategic goals, we want to ensure that we advocate for environmental protection and sustainable policies. We have to ensure that we secure and maintain public funding and donor support. Without them, we cannot stay afloat. We need to also attract and retain committed employees and volunteers. These are the persons that are for us and ensure that we stay afloat as well. And not last but not least, we uphold an ethical and inclusion environment culture. Imagine all being on board and we're in the same frame of mind to ensure that we're on one goal. Thank you.
Now, how HR's representations align with two strategic goals. Now, this is a very important and crucial role of HR to really promote publicly how HR advocate to sustain, these policies in the organization. How to make the work environment eco-friendly and how to practice eco-friendly in our workplaces, such as zero waste office supplies, carbon reduction incentives, at environmental forums aligned internal policies with external missions, reinforcing credibility. Trust me, secure funding and donations or donors trust HR represents workforce ethics, volunteer management policies and diversity data in donor meetings and grant reports. Build transparency and reassure that, the funders will see, a reward as it relates to contributing to something that actually promote a real cause and give back to the environment. Now, attract and retain talent, HR attends career fairs, university talks, and volunteer expos to share success stories and career pathways. Now, this really strengthens the talent pipeline and volunteer base, believe it or not. Now, some realistic examples of HR representation externally are like presenting on sustainable workforce management at NGO and environmental conferences, building partnerships within the universities for environmental internship programs, showcasing volunteers, testimonial in donor newsletter, thinking about internally within the organization. You can lead cultural initiatives like Green Workplace Challenge to engage employees in sustainability, acting as culture ambassadors during internal audits and external accreditation, which is very much important for the company and which puts the company at the forefront. Now, we look at the stakeholders' engagement strategies as well. Now, when we look at donors and funders, this really provides transparent HR reports on staff well-being. Yes, the staff well-being is very crucial and pivotal in a well, healthy, eco-friendly workplace. Volunteer satisfaction and ethical practices. Government and advocacy groups. These groups can participate in environmental workforce policy, roundtable to influence sustainable employment standards. When we talk about community and volunteers, now, we can host open house events to share impact stories and recognize contribution. This is important how to reiterate the different experiences that different persons would have gone through these different programs to show how effective it is. Now, when we talk about the employees, the buck stops there. Now, we can use town hall meetings to align staff culture with external advocacy messaging. Now, why does this alignment matters? I mean, we are already paying these people to come to work, and that should all that really matters. But let us jump right into it and look at it. Now, when we look at protects the reputation, HR lead transparency strengthens trust with donors and partners. Now, this really drives the mission and it actually integrates it where internal HR policies mirror the environmental advocacy mission. It also enhances influences, HR representation in policy spaces extend the organization's advocacy reach as well. It strengthens that as well. And to secure resources, ethical workforce management is often a funding requirement for grants. Now, definitely, you'd have seen below or references where you can find this information and where you can build on. Definitely, we want to thank you for tuning in and giving us a listening ears. Peace out.